Horios again. Um, I just wanted to give a little bit of hakdama. That is, we know if someone is over on a very b'shoyid, that would be chayiv kars, like eating chaylev, he has to bring a korban chatas. What if he only did the avera because Bezin said he could do it? Well, then he's not chayiv chatas. Then there's a third thing is when Roiv the tzibur does an avera based on the psak of Bezin, then there's something called the par helam davar shel tzibur. And there's a shaila that we're going to have in the Gemara. Does the tzibur bring that, or does the Bezdin bring it? And if the tzibur brings it, how do they pay for it? So those are the different shalos that we're going to come out. So let's see the Mishnah. Haru Bezdin lavar al achas mikol mitzvah shamuris b'torah. So the Mishnah is starting to discuss when a person is potter from bringing his private chatas, and that is if Bezdin paskin that it's mutter to do one of the mitzvahs that are also in the Torah. For instance, they said it's mutter to eat chaylev. V'holach hayachid v'asa shogig al piyam, and the yachid went and did it b'shogig because he was relying on their psak. Now it doesn't make a difference if they did it with him, if they let him. If he did it based on the psak of Bezdin, then it has the same halacha, which the Mishnah will say shortly. So bein she'asu v'asa iman. Say if Bezdin demonstrated they actually did the avera as well. They ate chaylev together, and he ate chaylev with them. Bein she'asu v'nasa v'asa acharein. Or if they ate chaylev and then he ate chaylev later. Or bein she'lo even if they didn't act on it, but v'asa he acted on it. Potter, he will be potter from bringing a korban chatas. Why? Mipnei she'tala bebezdin. He only ate this chaylev because he was relying on Bezdin that was matir. How about Haru Bezdin? But the Yoda Echad Mehen, one member of the Bezdin knew Sheto that they made a mistake. Oi, Talmud, there was a Talmud that was watching the Bezdin. He wasn't a member of the Bezdin, but he was a Talmud of the Bezdin. And this Talmud was advanced enough that he himself could have been a dayan. And then this person himself, or this Talmud himself, the halach v'asal pian, there you can't say I was totally in the Bezdin, because there you knew it was a mistake. You knew it was aser. So therefore, bein she'asu v'asa iman, say if he did it with them. Now, even if he did it with them, bein she'asu v'asa achreim, surely if he only did it after them, and kol shekain bein she'lo yasu v'asa. If he was the only one that violated, there he's chayiv his own personal korban chatos, because he didn't do it by relying on Bezdin, because he knew that they were making a mistake.
Didn't we just learn in the last week's parsha, if the Bezdin says Yemin is small and small is Yemin, you have to listen to them. So, and they should trump everything according to that pasuk.
So, are you referring to even a member of the Bezdin who knows that they're making a mistake?
No, not necessarily. What do you mean knows? It's his opinion. He suspects they're making a mistake. What do you mean knows?
Well, he was right. He was right.
But he was in retrospect.
Yeah.
But what about that pasuk?
So that pasuk is not referring to them saying something that's first prohibited in the Torah, that it's not prohibited. I don't know specifically what it's referring to, but it can't be referring to if they specifically were matir something that the Torah asks. So there has to be a limit to the scope of that halacha that you should even accept from them. Yemin as small and small as Yemin.
Isn't there a chazal that says that there was some Mandi Yomer says he can, that there's 1,000 ways to mutter something, even the chazer somehow. What the
Gemara tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he gave the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu, he took some of the main mitzvahs and he was able to show him how you could be matched and you could answer so that we'd be able to accept different opinions in the future. To show that not everything is absolute.
Right, through lumdus somehow.
Including Yamin Shmuel can't be absolute.
Including what?
The fact that you have to trust Chazal al Yamin Shu Shmuel, al Shmuel Shu Yamin.
So it's not so pashut here. The Mishnah seems to say it's very, they set out these rules. If Bezdin, says makes one psak, and you think it's wrong, you can't say no, it's wrong. He thinks it's wrong.
Well, we're going to see the Gemara says if he's one of the Dayanim on Bezdin, normally when you're a Dayan on Bezdin, it's your job to say your opinion, and then they follow the Roiv.
Right.
So if it's just a regular person, maybe there he has to listen to them blindly. But a member of the Bezdin has to state his understanding, right? That's how they paskin. They go b'saroi. So he paskin no. He only did it because the Roiv overruled him.
Right. And there's a case that I recall. I don't know who it is. There was a machlokes when Yom Kippur was, and the Bezdin paskin it was one way. And this Mandi Omer said when the Bezdin forced him to be over the day he thought was Yom Kippur.
On the day that he considered it to be Yom Kippur.
Right. So, and they argued.
If they found out that they were wrong, maybe he wouldn't have been Chayav Chatzos. But right now, where he has to go B'Sarav, he has to listen to them.
Well, there's a case where you can never find out you're wrong or right.
It's then I guess you have to follow the Bezdin.
Right? How do you find out? It's all up to the Bezdin.
Sometimes we're discussing a case where Bezdin did find out, because if they didn't find out, then there would have never been a discussion. The case by definition that we're discussing is where eventually Bezdin found out and they realized that they made a mistake. Because had they not ever figured that out, then there would be no Chatas brought at all. Right, that has to be the case over here.
Anyway, okay.
So let's see what it says.
Sounds a little strange to me.
Once we get to the details, I think it'll make more sense. Zaklal, hatoila ba'atzmoi, chayiv. If someone did the avera not because he was relying on Bezdin, then he'll be chayiv. But hatoila bevezdin, if someone's doing it strictly because he's trusting Bezdin, then he's potter from bringing a carbon chatas. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said, "La'olam ein Bezdin chayavin." Bezdin is not going to be chayiv. So when Bezdin is chayiv to bring, a par helam davar shel tibur, they're not chayiv. Achiyoimru lahem mutarim atem. They have to say quite clearly mutarim atem. Then there's their liability. Amar Avdimi Minahada. Avdimi Minahada said they have to do even more than that. Omar Achiyoimru Lahem Mutorim Atem La'asois. They have to specifically say the word La'asois, because otherwise it's not them being mattered enough. My timer, unless they say Mutorim Atem La'asois, we don't consider it that their psak has been sealed. Amar Abaye, Afananami Tanina. We also learned a Mishnah that says the same thing, that it's not considered a psak until it's very clearly articulated mutar matam lasois. And Abaye brings a raya from Zokin Mamre. A Zokin Mamre is somebody who refused to accept the psak of the Bezdin, but he is a very learned person. So it says he went to the Bezdin Agadol and they straightened him out. They said, "You're wrong with your psak." So at that point he should have given into that. And what did he do? Chazar le'irai, this Zokin Mamre went back to his city, and Shana v'limeid kederech shalimeid, and he continued to teach people in the same shita that he had, and he didn't accept the correction. Potter, that's not a Zokin Mamre who gets killed. But a Hoira Lassos, if he specifically paskined that it's mutter to do whatever it was that there was this dispute about, then he's chayiv misa. So you see, it's not considered a psak if he just talks about it. It's only a psak if he says mutter atam lasos. We also learned regarding a lady that Bezdin was matter to get married, even though there was only one aid. So what if they told her, Haru law Bezdin lihinase? They said she would be mutter to get married. The holcha will kill kala, and she went and was mizana. She didn't get married. Chayeves bekarban, she'll be chayev a carbon because she didn't have a psak from Bezdin to be able to remarry. Why? They only let her get married. Now this sounds very much like the problem here is that they said she can get married, not that she's mutter. And therefore, since they didn't say that she's a lady who's mutter l'shuk, she wasn't allowed to do anything. But it's mashma that had she gotten married, that would not have been a problem. I don't think that's the case. I think the issue here is that they didn't specifically tell her that she's mutter and ganzen. The reason why I think that is let's just have a quick look at Rashi. Harula bezdin lehina say al pi erechot the ibish nei edim letarich bezdin. You don't need bezdin to be matir. V'halcha v'kilkol biznus v'yarach ba baila, and then her husband showed up because in fact he didn't die. Chayeves bekarbon lefi shahais loy haisa toilet bebezdin. Because when she was mizana, she wasn't relying on bezdin. Mitakatani harula bezdin linasei v'loy katani hitirua bezdin. Shemami na the nigmira haru also. Their psak hasn't been completed, so it's not because they were not matter to be mizana only to do marriage. It's because their haru had not yet been completed. At sheyoimru mutarim atem lasois. And since they didn't articulate those words, mutarim atem lasois, therefore she's over. It almost sounds like even if she would have gotten married, not znus, she would have also had the same issue. I just want to point out a quick, here Tosfos is at the bottom. There's Rashi to fill up both margins. So because of that, Tosfos is placed at the bottom. Trying to get my camera, okay, it's focusing. Yeah, it's a little bit smaller over here. So Tosfos is an important point over here. Ben she'asu v'asayimah. Sarachiyim zak Tosfos im bezdin atman chayavin lahavi kaspa oisiira. If bezdin paskin that something is mutter, a chayv krisus, and you acted on them, you acted based on their psak. Our Mishnah says the yochid for sure doesn't bring a chatos, and the bezdin does not bring a par helam davar shel tzibur, because that's only when Rav Tzibur was. So does that mean no carbon is brought at all? Or maybe bezdin has to bring a private carbon chatos like a yochid would have brought had he done this on his own. The nehida par ein meviin elam kain Rav Tzibur also al pien mikol mokim carbon yochid laisu ushem apturin lagamri. So it's interesting because if someone ate chaylev al pi bezdin and he doesn't have to bring a carbon, so how does he get his kapara? So Tosfos ponders maybe bezdin would have to bring a regular carbon chatas under these circumstances, or maybe no, there's no carbon brought, and he gets his kapara without a carbon. Okay, so let's see the Gemara right here. So Abaye brought a raya from Zok and Mamre, and Reb Abba brought a raya from being mater a lady l'shuk, and Amar Avina, I'm going to bring a raya from Afanana Mitanina Haru Bez Laver Alachs Mikol Mitzvah Hamurish B'Torah. If Bezdin was mater one of the mitzvahs, so you see clearly they were moira la'avar to be over, so they clearly were mater it. Su loy midi. No need to discuss this further. It's quite clear that there has to be a full oira. So at this point, it's Rav Dimi who is Mekel, and he says that you need not stam that they paskin, but they said mutarim atem lasois. Ikad Amri, the positions are switched. Amar Shmuel ein bezdin chayovin achiyom ule mutarim atem lasois, and Rav Dimi Minado said Amar afilu mutarim atem. That's also considered nigmar hayra. So it just switches around who said what. Amar Abaye freiked Abaye v'haloi tananachi. So instead of Abaye bringing a raya to Rav Dimi, now Abaye is bringing those same cases as a kash on Rav Dimi, who now changed his position according to this lashon. Chazal Le'irei V'shana, I limod Kederach Shalimod Pater, Hayr Lashes Chayiv. Amar Rababa, I also have a problem with what you're saying, Rav Dimi, because it says Hayr Lo Bezin Lehina Say, V'alchav V'kilkala, Chayeves B'Karbon, Shalai Yitir Lo Ella Lehina Say. Amar Ravina, V'alei Tanan Hachi, Hayr Bezin Lavor Alachas Mikol Mitzvah Shamush B'Tara, Sulai Midi. So basically, it's the same Gemara repeated, depending on if some of the Rishonim discuss why did in the second lashon, why are we asking a kasha Rav Dimi? Why didn't we just bring a raya to Shmuel? Just like it was in the first lashon. So they say something that's a little complex. Zog to the more weiter. V'halach hayochid v'asa shoygig al piyam. Frank the Gemara, why does it say v'asa shoygig al piyam? V'halach hayochid v'asa al piyam. V'nisni v'asa al piyam. Shoygig lamali. Why does the Tana stick in this extra word shoygig? Omarava shoygig lasuye. The following case: Haru Bezin shechelav mutter. Bezin was matter that chelav was mutter, and then he didn't go and eat chelav. There was a piece of shuman that he thought there was a piece of chelav that he misidentified as shuman, and he ate it. So even if Bezdin didn't matter it, he would have eaten it anyway because he thought that it was shuman. He didn't even realize that it was chelav. So is he part of from bringing a carbon chatas then? Normally, that's a classic case of chatas. You think it's shuman, and it really was chelav. But here, even if it was chelav, he would have eaten it anyway because Bezdin said chelav is mutter. So that is the shaila. Amrava shoygel asuye haru Bezdin shechelav mutter v'nischalav loy chelav b'shuman v'achloi potter. Why? Al PM mamish. Okay, let's see what Rashi says on Al PM mamish. Al PM mamish can go in shaharu Bezdin shechelav mutter v'halach v'asa al PM lashmi'inon the shoygig al PM potter. So it's stuck in the extra word shoygig to say that not only if it was al PM mamish, that's what al PM means, but shoygig that the Mishnah adds on as an extra word is telling us that even if he ate it with the classic case of shoygig, because he thought that it was shuman, that would also be covered by this patur. But the ikadamri amarava shoygig al PM who the potter. I'm sorry. Because, but the only time the Torah says that you don't have to bring a carbon is only if you ate it because of their psak, and here you're not relying on their psak. Or maybe shoygig al piyam hu the potter avol neschalav loy chelav b'shumin v'achloi chayiv because dafka al piyam zok to Gemara milsa de pshita leila Rava, something that was potter to Rava, that was pasha to Rava. Now we have two lashonis what Rava said, but whatever he said, he wasn't mesupikin. As Shlomi Feinberg always says about his father, my father was sometimes right and he was sometimes wrong, but he was always sure. I think that's what he said. Okay, the pshit leila Rava coming boy leila Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama actually had a suffix. What would be the halacha? The boy Rami Bar Chama hayu bezin shechelav muter. And it turned out that he ate chelaf thinking that it was shuman. What would be the Allah? So Rabba wanted to bring a raya. Tashma halach yochid also shoygig al pihem. So exactly the two lashonis that we have in Rava, according by Rabbi Chama, Rava brought him a raya. Shoygig al pihem lamali lav lasuye. Haru Bezdin shechelav mutter v'nischalav loy chelav b'shumin v'achlei potter. So Gemara no dilma shoygig al piyam with the potter of nischalav loy chelav b'shumin v'achlei chayiv. So these are the two lashonis of Rava, which Rava was able to tell Rabbi Bechama. He tried to bring a raya, and the Gemara suggested maybe not. Ikadamri. So basically, it's the same information presented in a different fashion. Ikadamri Amar Rava Tashma. We don't. No, because
I didn't do it all best business. So why is it perfect?
Because so you're asking the why. The why we can discuss, but Lamaisa, do you have a raya from our Mishnah or not? Because our Mishnah is stuck in the word shogig. So you definitely might have a raya from the Mishnah that shogig would also be potter from a carbon. Now the question is, what would the reason be? Well, the question is that called dolab das bezna or not? You're saying it's not because Lamaisa was a shogig. But you can look at it from a different perspective. Had he known there was chaylev, would he have eaten it anyway? Yes, he would have, because Bezdin passing it was mutter. So it could be he's still covered by that umbrella. Amar Rava Tashma Halach Yachid V'asa Shoygig Al Piyam. Let's look at our Mishnah. Halach Yachid V'asa Shoygig Al Piyam. My lab Shoygig Al Piyam Hu Depat. Dafka, if the Shoygig was because he followed what they said. Avon Neschalef Lechelev V'Shum V'Achlei would be chayiv. Maybe that's not how you read the Mishnah. Dilma Oy Shoygig Al Piyam. Zaktamar Beplukta. This Shaila that we're discussing about these two Lashonis, between Rav and Rabbi Bar Chama, is also a machloikis elsewhere by a different set of Amoraim. Haru Bezdin shechelav muter v'nischalav lo chelav v'shumin v'achlei. Rav Amar Pater, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayiv, exactly the same shaila that we had. Meisher Frek the Gemara. It says in the pasuk me'am ha'aretz ba'asoisa. Who could bring a korban chatos? Let's look at the pasuk. V'im nefesh achas techto b'shkaga me'am ha'aretz ba'asoisa. So me'am ha'aretz ba'asoisa achas mitzvos Hashem asher lo yiseh of Hashem. This is talking about someone who does an avera b'shogeg. So we learn the following from this pasuk. Me'am ha'aretz ba'asoisa is prat l'mumar. A mumar who doesn't listen to the Torah, so he would do it whether or not the Torah says it's mutter or not. So, that's only if he would have refrained from doing it had he known that it's also. But a murmur who does this avera behedya, even if he happened not to know this time that what he ate was chelav, would not have the benefit of the kapara of the korban chatos. Rabbi Shimon ben Yosy Omer, Mishum Rabbi Shimon. Now this pasuk is not referring to a standard korban chatos; it's referring to a nosi. Asher nosi yechta v'asa achas mikol mitzvos Hashem olekov asher lo yisei asena b'shkaga v'Hashem oyhoidei lav katosay asher chotaba. So it says asher lo yisei asena, he did something that should not be done. V'Hashem oyhoida. So we learn from there that ashav mi yidiyasi may be carbon al shikalasoi. Who brings a korban chatas? Only somebody who would have not done it had he known. But had he known, he would have done it anyway. He doesn't bring a korban. So your question is, this seems to be the identical shita as the Tanakama, who's me'ama oretz basoisa. So the Rashi explains. I have to talk to him. Quick break. I need to grab a tissue. It's over. Okay, so Zot Rashi, the difference is very simple. The first Manda Amar is being a mummer who's a mummer l'chalatar kula. He doesn't do any mitzvahs, or he will violate any aveir. He doesn't do a korban. But what if the person keeps all the mitzvahs? It's just this specific mitzvah that he doesn't keep. So that's where Reb Shimon says, Asher lo yiseh b'shkaga, only if he would have refrained from doing this specific aveira, had he known it was aser, only then does he have the benefit of korban chatos. So even if he's not a mummer, it's just this one aveira that he does, that would also make him ineligible to bring a korban chatos. Okay, so Zok to Gemara, v'im hisa, if, and this was Mati's kasha, if you're going to hold that a shoygeg who ate chelef thinking it was shuman, and Bezdin had paskin that it's mutter, haloi shav mi yidiyosei. This guy cannot bring a korban. You know why? Because he's not shav mi yidiyosei. Because even if he would have known that it was chelef, he would have eaten it anyway. So how could you hold that he would bring a korban? So on the tzad that we learned that you do bring a korban, you do bring because it's a regular shoygeg, and he didn't do it because of Bezdin being mattered. So then I bezoi. This is somebody that even if he would have known that it was chaylev, he would have eaten it anyway. So therefore, how could he possibly bring a korban? How could you possibly say that he brings a korban? Omar Papa, Kasav Rabbi Yochanan, you know Rabbi Yochanan holds, because Rabbi Yochanan holds his chayv to bring korban. Kivan dechimis yada lahu l'beidina hajibahu. When Bezdin finally realizes their mistake, they themselves will reverse course and when they do that, he will of course reverse course with Bezin because he'll accept Bezin's reversal. So that's Shav Yosy Karinin Beivachai. That's good enough. So you don't just say simply, if he would have known it was Chalef, he would have eaten it anyway. No, if he would have had the idea of Bezin, who now reversed their sak, and therefore surely he would have not eaten it, he qualifies under Shogeg, and he's chayiv to bring a carbon. Amar Rava, Moide Rav, Rav is Moide. So Rav holds that this fellow doesn't have to bring a carbon. So basically, the problem lies on the Bezdin's head because they paskin's wrong. Now, we know the halacha is, if Roiv Tzibur listened to Bezdin and ate from this 8 chalef, there's something called a par helam davar shel tzibur. What if it was 50-50? 50% of Klal Yisrael ate chaylev because Bezdin said it was allowed. And this guy who would push the needle over to 51% to be mechayiv them and par helam davar shel tzibur, he didn't even know that it was chaylev. Does he count? Dr. Gemara Moide Rav she'enei masham l'roiv tzibur. Even though we consider him from the group that can rely on Bezdin, and therefore he doesn't bring a carbon chatos, but he definitely won't push the needle over to be part of the roiv who ate chaylev because of the psak of Bezdin. My time, what's the reason for that? Because Amar Kra bishkaga, they had to have eaten it bishkaga achu kulon bishigaga achas. They have to not just only both be shogeg, they have to both be the same shogeg. His shogeg is that he didn't know it was chaylev. Their shogeg is because they thought that chaylev was mutter. That does not combine. Zok Gemara weiter. Bein Joseph also imoin. Lo melela misna kol han. In each case, in the ratio of the Mishnah, it lists off 3 options. You did it with Bezdin, you did it after Bezdin, or you did it and Bezdin didn't even do it. And in the Seifa, it's the same 3 steps are mentioned. So Bishlam and ratio loizu afsu katani. Well, we would for sure agree that if he did it together with Bezdin, for sure he should be potter from a carbon. If he did it after Bezdin, maybe then he shouldn't be potter. And if he did it and Bezdin didn't even do it, maybe he should also be chayav a carbon. So it builds up the chiddush. So it's loizu avzu katan. Elasefer de lechiyuva in the sefer where he does bring a carbon chatos. If you want to build up the chiddush, it should have said it punkvaker. It should have said it's pashut that he brings a carbon if he did it after them, but he even brings a carbon if he did it with them together, right? So it should have had that same build up. Zaktimar, no, in that part of the Mishnah is using a different format, the format called Zu ve'ein tzarich loimer zu katani. Sometimes the chiddush is mentioned last, and it's a build-up like in the Reisha, and sometimes the chiddush is mentioned first, and the Mishnah just says not only this, but even a smaller, but kol shkein a smaller. Okay, v'yoda echad mehen shato oy talmud v'roy lahira. What exactly happened over here? One of the members of Bezdin knew that there was a mistake, or was a talmud v'roy lahira? Why do I need the Mishnah to list off 2 cases? They're really both the same thing. That it's someone who has enough authority and enough knowledge that he didn't do it. We don't consider that he did it based on Aaron's Bezdin. So why do I need 2 examples? Amar Rabba Itzra, I'll tell you why I need it. So who will be chayiv, can't rely on the Bezdin, is someone who's gomer v'saver, someone who's royu mamish, to be a dayan. Gomer means lomad hadavar, he learned this, v'saver, maven davar misach davar. So Sai, he's knowledgeable, and Sai, he's a alumnum. He understands how to compare things and contrast and know what fits into what category. In other words, he's a Sinai and he's an Iker Har. However, Avol Gomer v'loy Savir loy, are you telling me that if he's only well learned, but he's not an Iker Har, then he would not bring a Chatas? Zok to Gemara, not the Rabbi, Avol Gomer Savir loy. Amalei Abaye, what are you talking about? Lehayra is gomer v'saver mashma. How could you tell me that even if it's gomer v'saver gomer, he qualifies? The fact that the Mishnah says v'royu lehayra, someone is only roy lehayra if he's a gomer v'saver. Amalei anahachi kamina. Imi ahi havamina hanamili gomer v'saver. Avol gomer v'saver loy tana royu lehayra mimishni seira afilu gomer v'saver saver gomer. So now it's a much less of a geschmack idea. So what Rav is saying is, you're right. Sai a Talmud has to be roy ra, and Sai a member of Bezdin has to be Sover, Gomer, Visover. So, how could I possibly learn from the Mishnah that even if it's Gomer Sover, or even if it's Sover Gomer, merely because of the extra piece of information that wasn't necessary? Why did the Mishnah need to tell us both a member of the Bezdin or Talmud V'Roy Le'Ra? They're one and the same. From the Yiter alone will also, even though both these characters are Gomer V'Sover, but from the Yiter alone, we'll say if he's one or the other, it will still be enough to be Mechayim. So Amalei Anahachi Kamina. Imeyahi Havamina Hanamili Gomer V'Sover. I would have thought Dafka Gomer V'Sover of Gomer V'Loy Loy. Therefore, a ton of Roy Le'Ra, which it doesn't need to say. So therefore, it's completely extra. I mean, Mishnah Yisera Afilu Gomer V'Sover Sover LeGomer. But the fact that the Mishnah just threw in an extra piece of information, will deduce from there that it's also including into the circle of people who can't rely on Bezdin as someone who's either Gomer or a Sover. Roy Le'Ra, Kagoin Man, who would you consider as an example of a person who's Roy Le'Ra? Amar Rabbi Kagoin Shimon ben Azai v'Shimon ben Zoyba. Amalei Abaye, Yehagav Memezedu. They're mamish gedoy le'olam. If they ain't chaylev knowing that Bezdin Paskin's wrong, that's not called a shoygeg. That's amazing. So how could you possibly say that this is the case? Break the Gemara. Now, this kasha is going to be a little bit fair based on what David Zolti asked. What about the fact that even if they tell you, oh, you mean you small, but small you mean, why you call that amazing? I guess if you're a member of the Bezdin, you have different rules. But David's kasha becomes magnified with this line in the Gemara. Ki hagav nemezer. Zok Gemara ulatamech. Had Tanya ba'asoisa. It says ba'asoisa, and we learn achas yochid. It says ba'asoisa achas. It says ba'asoisa. So let's look at the whole pasuk because there's multiple limudim that's learned out of this pasuk. And nevesh achas takla b'shkaga meyam ha'aretz ba'asoisa achas mimitzvah Hashem asher lo yisei son of Hashem. So we dash in ba'asoisa achas. That means yochid ha'oisa mipi atzmai chayiv. If someone ate chaylev on his own, thinking it was shumin, then he will be chayiv a carbon katos. But by Rosh Bezin, then he will be potter. Ketzad, Haru Bezin, Shechelev Mutter, V'noida la'echad la'achamen sheto. Then they found out that it was, V'noida la'echad mehen. And one member of the Bezin knew that they had made a mistake. Oy Talmud Yoshev Lufneim V'ror Le'ra. But this price is specific. Kegoyin Shimon ben Azai. Yochel Yepotter Talmud Lomer Ba'asoisa Achas. Yochid Ha'isa. So the question is, you're asking me a kasha because I said it's someone like Shimon ben Zayma. Asked the Brisa says beferish. It's referring to Shimon ben Zayma. So you should have a bigger kasha on the Brisa. It's amazing. He should be chayiv. Elohechem ish kachas lo. Dr. Moore, I'll tell you where the shayla came in. He go in the yoda the aser the katoi b'mitzvah l'shmoya divrei chacham. He made a mistake because he thought that there's a mitzvah l'shmoya divrei chachamim afilu lemever isuras of crash. So that's why he's a shoygin. He knew that this was chayla, but he thought, like what David Zolti brought up, that even if they tell you al yamin shu shmoel, al shmoel shu yamin, you have to listen to them, and that's why he ate it. He ate it because of that halacha. But what he didn't know is that halacha has a limitation. The limitation is if you know they're wrong and you're a member of the Bezdin, you're not allowed to act like that. I'm sorry. But he trusted, he accepted their psak, even though he was against it. I'm also saying it's Shimon ben Zayma and Shimon ben Nazai to tell the mitzvah l'shmoya different. Right, so it's not like they told him that he has to eat it. They told him he may eat it, but may eat it is enough that he could eat it and rely on the Bezdin. Kamash know that does have a limitation. Zok Gemara weiter. Zaklal. Hatoila ba'atzmoi chayiv. The Yisuyamai. At the end, the Mishnah rounds it up with a zaklal. So whenever the Mishnah rounds it up with a zaklal, it's always trying to be meramis that this applies elsewhere, not only in the direct case of the Mishnah. L'suyay mevayit b'hoyroh. Someone who is an apikoris, he never listens to Bezdin. So if someone's never listening to Bezdin and he ate chaylev based on the psak of Bezdin, we don't consider it that he's potter from a carbon because that's a guy who never listened to Bezdin. So he could never say, I ate it because Bezdin was matter. So such a person can never have the tour. He will always have to bring a carbon as Rashi says, Rashi, I don't like saying this in El, but Rashi actually describes people that we know. Let's look at this Rashi. Shemhaya Rogel Lios Mevait Bayra. There's a guy who always was Mevatel the Rabbanim. The Achagach Horu Shechelav Mutter. Then they said Chelav is Mutter. V'halach Zaham Mevait. This fellow who always makes fun of the Rabbanim. V'asal Piem. And he ate Chelav, he will be Chayiv. Why? The Hoyel who Rogel Lios Mevait, since he never listens to the Chum, he always curses them out. Hashtanami Mevait. Here he's doing it anyway. He's not doing it just to Rabbanim because he never trusts him. And therefore,
So why should be chayv carbon if he does it on purpose? Okay, and
he doesn't have the tour of Bezdin even if he did it b'shoyki. But you're right.
If he did it b'mezid. If you do it b'mezid, then you're not chayv carbon. You're chayv chorus or something.
Then you chayv chorus. So what does he chayv? So maybe he's chayv chorus. And he's not, maybe what chayiv means he's chayiv chorus. What I don't understand is, a moment ago when we were talking about a yochid roy le'ra, the Gemara gave examples. How come over here by Mevait by Ra, the Gemara doesn't give examples? I have so many examples. So to Gemara, Toila bebezdin lesuye haru bezdin v'yodu shato v'chazru behem. If he knew that they made a toast and then they were chayzer, so that's also called Toila bebezdin, and there you would not have to make a carbon. Freit the Gemara, I don't understand. Didn't we just say by the Talmud it's mufurish over there? Zok to Gemara, Tani Vadam Mefarish. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm very mistaken. Not on our Mishnah. In the next Mishnah, Rashi says, on Daf Gimel, the Mishnah specifically lists that off. Zok to Gemara, Tani Vadam Mefarish. The Zaklal is alluding to it, and then in the next Mishnah, the Mishnah specifies that case exactly. So that's a case of Hayru Bezin v'Yadu Shato. If Bezdin knew, so Bezdin Paskin this chaylev is mutter, and then they found out that they made a mistake. V'Chazru Ben and Bezdin was chayzer, but you didn't get the message. You didn't get the message, and you thought it was mutter, and you ate it based on their psak, even though at that point they had already rescinded the psak. We'll see in the Mishnah that that's considered also Toila bebezdin, and you would be put. It's a discussion about. Rabbi Yehuda. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda, who says you don't have to bring a carbon chatos if you did it based on Horios bezdin. But the Chachamim hold Yachid also by Ros bezdin would be chayiv. He holds this whole mission is not true. If you make a mistake and you eat chaylev and it's because bezdin was matter, you have to bring a carbon chatos anyway. My Rabbi Yehuda, who is Rabbi Yehuda? The Tanya says in the pasuk, "Im nefesh achas techto b'shkaga ba'asoisa harei elu gimel mi'utim." There's three mi'utim in this pasuk, achas and b'shkaga and ba'asoisa, and the two out of the three lemudim are not relevant to our sugya, but one of these three lemudim is very relevant, and that is ba'oisa mi'piatz meichayiv by Roy's best and Potter. That's Rabbi Yehuda who holds if you do something by Rosh Bezin, you don't have to bring the chatos. The Gemara told us, Shmuel told us, there's a Rabbanon who argues. So my Rabbanon, who are the Rabbanon who argue? The Tanya we learned. Adayin ani omer. I still hold miut kahal shechatu chayovim. If the meat of the kahal, the Chacham would be arguing on our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, but you should know there is a shita that argues, and we're going to call them the Rabbanon. Because the Bais says, "Adayin ani omer, miut kahal shechatu chayov." If the meat of the cow ate chaylev improperly, they're going to be chay. Now we don't know under what terms they ate chaylev. Did they eat chaylev because they thought it was shumin, or did they eat chaylev because Bezdin passed that it's mutter? We don't know exactly what the case is. Let's just read the unclear words in the Bais. Bezdin does not bring a par helm davar. So once again, if only miut of the cow were chayte, they have to bring a carbon, an individual carbon. Each one has to bring individual carbonates. You know why? Because Bezdin is not bringing one for them. So roiv kahal shechatu. So if roiv kahal were chayte, you turn. Then they for sure should be potter, because in that case, Sharei Bezin Mavin al Yedeim Par. Because Bezin's bringing a carbon for them. Zok to Gemara, Talmud Leimer, Zok to Bais Avager, Talmud Leimer, Me Ama Oretz, Afilu Ruba, Vafilu Kula, they have to bring a carbon. So this is very unclear what we're talking. B'mai, what is the Bais referring? Ilema b'shiglas ma'isa. If what the Brisa is referring to is a shiglas ma'isa, which means they thought it was shuman and they ate it. So they ate it be'isr, not realizing that they were eating chayla, but Bezdin had played no role in this, and that's what it means. Miut kal shachatu chayavin. If miut of the kal ate chayla thinking that it was shuman, because she'ain Bezdin mavin al yidei and par, because Bezdin definitely not going to bring a carbon for them. So Elam b'shiglas ma'isa. Shaloi by Ross Bezdin, the gears is a little off here. Shaloi by Ross Bezdin. It wasn't because Bezdin was materit. So then Bezdin might have to tell you. What does Bezdin have to do with this? Why would you think they bring a par? They have no shaykhs to this. Zok to Gemara, Shaloi by Ross Bezdin, Bezdin Mimaiser. Okay. Ella b'hayra. And the gears is not good. So if we're talking about Shugdas Maiser, where they thought it was Shumin, what does Bezdin have to do with this? Ella b'hayra. It must be that we're discussing Miut Kahal that ate Chaylev because Bezdin passed that Chaylev was mutter. So the problem is, Vakik Sid may Amaoret B'Shugdas Maisa Hudich. Why would I think that I would not bring a carbon chatos if I did a Shugdas Maisa? So it can't be referring to that, right? And in the second half of the Mishnah that says, so if Roiv did it, maybe they shouldn't bring a carbon. Why? Because Bezdin brings a pile over. But that's not true. It's not true. But Yeshiglas Maisa, Bezdin never brings a carbon. Elalav Hachikamer. This is what the Brisa must be trying to say. Miut Kahal Shechotu B'Shiglas Maisa. If a meat of the Kahal was over and they ate Chaylev thinking it was Shuman, Chayovin, they're surely going to be chayiv each person an individual carbon chatos. Why? She'ein Bezdin mevin al yedein par b'hara. Because even if this was a case where Bezdin was mater chaylev and a mute of Klal Yisrael ate chaylev because of that, Bezdin would still not bring a par hom davar shel tzibur, because Bezdin only brings a par hom davar shel tzibur when Roiv of Klal Yisrael did that. So ha'ein chayavin. So Bezdin ha'ein chayavin. Bezdin does not bring a par helam davar shel tzibur when a meat of Klal Yisrael eats chaylev thinking that it's shumin, hahein chayavin. But each individual would have to bring a carbon chatos if they ate chaylev thinking it was shumin. But yochel roiv tzibur should also be shigas ma'aser yipaturin. But then I might think that what if roiv Klal Yisrael ate chaylev because they thought it was shumin, not because Bezdin passing for them? Then Dr. Bryce, maybe they should be potter from bringing a carbon chatos, from bringing personal carbon chatos. Why? Because Shari Bezdin Mavin Aleim Par B'Hayra. Because if it was B'Hayra, if Bezdin would have passed that mutter tit chaylev, then Bezdin would have brought a carbon. So maybe Huadin, if Roiv Klal Yisrael ate chaylev thinking it was shuman, Talmud Leimer me Ama Oretz, Afilu Rubai, even Roiv of Klal Yisrael who ate chaylev thinking that it was shuman. Even if Rav Klal Yisrael ate chaylev thinking that it was shuman, they still have to bring individual karbonas. So what do you see from here? You see from here that even if Bezdin paskin for a meat of Klal Yisrael and a meat of Klal Yisrael ate chaylev based on their psak, hahein chayavin, they have to bring a carbon chatos, and this was the raya to the shita of the Rabbanon, that there's a shita of the Rabbanon holds that even if meat Klal Yisrael ate chaylev because they were relying on psak of Bezdin, they would still have to bring a carbon chatos, which is not like our Mishnah, who holds even an individual who ate chaylev based on the psak of Bezdin that he doesn't have to bring a carbon chatos. Okay, we'll stop here. We really shouldn't be stopping here because mamish in the middle of the shakla of Taya, but we're going to have to go back anyway to the beginning of the Bais. I'm sorry. That's right, because when it's right, the Torah specifically says that there's a par helam davar shel tzibur. So the question is, when it's a miyut and there's no Pahal B'Shal Tzibur, do the individuals have to bring a Korban Chatash or not? The Rabbanan holds they do, and the Mishnah holds they don't. It's up here. There's very long letter because the Tosuses are on the bottom.